George Vancouver and Robert Gray were explorers, traders, and adventurers of the Pacific Northwest. Without knowing it, they would soon affect the culture, geography, and economy of what would soon become known as Washington State. To know how these people affect Washington, it's important to know who they are. George Vancouver was born into a well-to-do family in Kingsland, Norfolk, England, on June 22, 1757. He was the youngest of 5 children. In 1771, he entered the Royal Navy of England at only 13. His very first voyage was on the Resolution under the respected Captain James Cook. Captain Cook is believed to be the first European to discover the Hawaiian Islands, which he named the Sandwich Islands. This was on Captain Cook's second voyage when he was looking for the Great Southern Continent. The Great Southern Continent is known as Antarctica today. Vancouver was assigned to Captain Cook again after returning from his first voyage with Cook. This expedition was to be Cook's third and last as his crew searched for the fabled Northwest Passage, possible passage between the Hudson Bay and the Pacific Ocean. Unfortunately for Cook, he died in a skirmish with the natives when his crew stopped in the Sandwich Islands for resupply. Vancouver barely escaped with his life. The crew continued on without their captain, heading for the west coast. On March 29, 1778, Vancouver became one of the first Europeans to have landed off the coast of present-day British Columbia. He and the crew made it back to England, their mission a failure. His next voyage would not be for 3 years. On October 19, 1780, Vancouver was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. Soon after, he spent 9 years on different warships in and out of combat in the Caribbean. Shortly after returning to England, he was given command of the Discovery on December 15, 1790. On April 1, 1791, he was given orders to find information with respect to the nature and extent of water communication between the northwest coast of America and the country on the opposite side of the continent, and to examine and survey the coast between 30 and 60 degrees north. On that day, the Discovery and the smaller ship, the Chatham, set sail for the Hawaiian Islands. The route they took went around the tip of Africa and past Australia, and that is where we switch to the life of Robert Gray. 2 years before George Vancouver was born, Robert Gray was, on May 10, 1755. He was born in Tiverton, Rhode Island, and grew up to become a fur trader. He was the son of William and Elizabeth Gray, but little else is known about his childhood and early years. Curiously enough, his job in the fur trading business started when a friend heard that Captain Cook had been able to sell furs in China for a high price. Sometime before his trips, he served in the Continental Navy of the United States of America. He ended up making a total of 2 trips to the Pacific Northwest. One of his accomplishments was that he was the first American captain to circumnavigate the globe. When these 2 explorers began their own voyages as captains, they began to make history in Washington State. Although neither Vancouver nor Gray were cartographers, they both expanded the world's knowledge of the Pacific Northwest. Starting with Vancouver, his exploration of the Puget Sound added names to many of today's landmarks. After setting sail and reaching the Hawaiian Islands, he and his crew headed for the Pacific Northwest. They spotted the west coast on April 17, 1792, and entered the Strait of Juan de Fuca. On May 19, 1792, he began to name landmarks, 75 in all, including Mount Baker after his 3rd Lieutenant Joseph Baker, Mount Rainier after Rear Admiral Peter Rainier, Port Townsend after the Marquis of Townsend, Hood's Canal after the Right Honorable Lord Hood, Whidbey Island after the Master of the Discovery, Joseph Whidbey, Vashon Island after Vancouver's friend Captain James Vashon, Admiralty Inlet after the Board of Admiralty, and Puget Sound after Lieutenant Peter Puget. The most notable of these is the Puget Sound. Having a surface area of over 1,000 square miles makes it the largest landmark of all. Before all of this naming, Vancouver found the island that he co-named Quadra and Vancouver's Island. We'll get more into exactly who this Quadra person is later. One of his more disappointing discoveries is that he verified that no continuous channel connected the Hudson Bay to the Pacific Ocean, disproving the fabled Northwest Passage. Robert Gray also brought his own notable discoveries to the table. His most famous and notable discovery was of the Columbia River. He was the first non-native to ever enter the river. Once discovered, Gray claimed the river and the surrounding land for the U.S. He presumably did this for all of the places he found. Many had tried to enter the Columbia, but the mouth of the river was littered with hidden sandbars and debris. The other deterrence was the raging river itself, which was much more powerful than it is today. Before Gray came, the Native Americans knew the river as the Wimmel, which translates to Big River. Robert Gray didn't just name the river Columbia for no reason. He named it after his ship, the Columbia Rediviva. Another body of water he named was Murderer's Harbor, which he named because his servant was killed by Native Americans there. This bay was later named Tillamook Bay. On May 7, 1792, he named another bay, Bullfinch Harbor, which was later named Gray's Harbor, after Robert Gray. Landmarks may be named and lands explored, but those don't mean anything if there's not a country that claims them. That was the dilemma of the Pacific Northwest. No country could claim a piece of land without another country saying, "Oh no, that's my land." Then nobody could decide whose land was whose. George Vancouver and Robert Gray helped with that. We'll start with Gray this time. All the land he had discovered, he claimed for the U.S. Of course, there was no legitimate way for him to prove this except his word. He gave the U.S. a stake in the ownership of the Columbia River, the land surrounding it, Tillamook Bay, Gray's Harbor, much of the Pacific coast of present-day Washington, and a general claim to the land in present-day Washington. George Vancouver, on the other hand, worked for the British. He gave them a claim to Vancouver Island, much of present-day Canada's west coast, the islands between Vancouver Island and the Puget Sound itself, which was eventually claimed by the U.S. One of the main problems the British and Vancouver encountered was not the U.S., but the Spanish. However, the U.S. and British Pig War caused quite a lot of trouble. The Spanish had sent Señor Don Juan Francisco de la Bodega y Quadra to negotiate land claims. His name translates to Mr. Don Juan Francisco from the winery in Quadra. He and Vancouver met on Quadra and Vancouver's Island to discuss the matter. Eventually, the Quadra part of the name dropped, leaving us with what we know today as Vancouver's Island. The two were constantly arguing over whose land should be whose, and could never seem to get anything done. Although not too many American or European settlements had been made near the Pacific coast, Vancouver and Gray were still able to affect the economy of the Pacific Northwest. Gray's profession as a fur trader brought commerce with the Native Americans and the occasional other fur trader. His exploration and discovery of the Columbia River and the various bays and harbors on the coast allowed for trade and commerce to move through them in the future. His crew also traded trinkets and toys with the natives. All of these boosted or added to the local economy in some way. George Vancouver's exploration and naming of the Puget Sound allowed for the knowledge of its existence to spread to outsiders who could use the calm waters of the Sound for harbors and port cities. Some of these cities evolved into the cities we know today as Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia. On a more negative side, Vancouver affected the economy by negating the possibility of a Northwest Passage for commerce. As all humans do, Vancouver died on May 10, 1798 to an unknown cause. Robert Gray died of a yellow fever in the summer of 1806 at sea. All in all, George Vancouver and Robert Gray were intrepid explorers and discoverers of their time, who affected the economy, geography, and politics of the Pacific Northwest and Washington state. They were able to expand humanity's knowledge of the world, add to their home country's land, and boost and create the local economy. They may be dead, but their effects on Washington are still felt today.